put the baffle plate on first. That's held on with 2 screws. If I can locate it in the right position. Little tip, if you have a job locating a screw and you can't get it to go on your screwdriver, pop a little bit of blue tack or something in the end, or a bit of thick grease, and then it'll hold the screw while you pop it in place like that. Make sure the screws are done up tight. You don't want them coming loose, obviously. Remember which way you took the fan and everything off. You need the little spacer goes on first, look. Spacer, then one of the washers, one of the large washers. Then the fan, that way up, if you remember. I'm going to use my box spanner and Tommy bar. Right, that's that. That's not too bad. And then all we've got to do is ram this on the end. The same as when we took it off. So I don't want to be too brutal with it, obviously. I'm trying to press it in by hand rather than... I'll give it a little tap. That should be okay. I think that's about right. So we've got the fan chamber and everything on. Now it's just a question of putting the field coils and the motor top cover on. So there's the field coils. There's the little mark I made earlier. And I've got to find the little mark on the motor casing, which is there, look. So the field coils should go on then that way there. There's, make sure the holes line up. And you see, almost forgot that. There's a little spring washer that goes on top of the bearing that keeps it in the cap, that just takes up any play. And I could easily have forgotten that. That looks about right. Make sure it goes in with the spring washer. Get your 2 bolts. Box spanner. Right, I've tightened that up. Just make sure it runs freely. That's fine. That's got nice. There's free rotation, no end play and no side play, so that's fine. Just one more check on the bolts. That's fine there. Right, brush holders in. All I've got to do now is put the screw in, which is easy enough to do, isn't it? Right, well, we've got the motor basically back together now. All I've got to do now is to get these little wires from the field coils and clamp them under the little brass pieces, which is going to be a bit tricky, but we'll have a go anyway. It's got to be done. It's going to be a bit fiddly. Obviously, when you're replacing the wire in this little connector here, you've got to make sure that it's got no enamel on it, because if it's enamel coated, it won't make a good connection and the thing won't go at all. So I've got to be careful. I'm just going to... It's a fiddly thing to do, but like I said, they don't want you to do it. I think that one's in. Looks in. I'm going to go for that. It's very difficult to clamp that because you can't get your pliers in. I don't know if I can do it like this. Well, it's very tricky. There must be a way. Obviously they do it in the factory, but... Well folks, those little wires that go into those clamps, to be honest with you, I'm not confident that they'll go in properly and get a good connection. It's very fiddly to get in there. To clamp them down tightly, and I can see a situation where it's going to be arcing and it's not going to work properly. So I'm thinking possibly the best way is to get my soldering iron out and actually solder those wires on. It would be much better than being clamped in there. At least we'll know they've got a good connection. Right, let's try a bit of soldering, folks. Make sure the iron's nice and hot. Seems to be working. I'm only using a small soldering iron. What I've done, I've clamped it as best I can, and I left a little tail of wire over the top. I've put a bit of flux on it, and I'm going to do is put a bit of solder on the top just to make absolutely sure, because I'm concerned that won't make a good connection. Yeah, I think that'll be fine. That should be better now. So I'll just go around and do the others the same way. Bit of Fluxite, good old fashioned Fluxite. I don't think you can buy that now, folks. I think they banned it for something. It's probably caustic or does something, kills you with somewhere. So just see if I can get a dab of solder to make a good connection. Right, well, I've got the soldering done. I'm just going to use my little multimeter just to check that we've got a circuit through it. I don't want to put it all together again. And if the needle moves, we're okay. And there it does, look. So we've actually got continuity. So we know it's making a good connection. The field coils are alright, the armature's alright, we've got a connection through it, so hopefully Bob's your uncle. I've got the motor connected up now. I've used a couple of these bits of wire. Actually, this wire's got a history itself. typical scrimper. This comes out of a Hoover Keymatic washing machine that was last manufactured in 1966. And I used to keep the old wiring from and use it in my various electrical and electronic projects. But it's ideal for connecting this up. I'm just going to connect these up on these little tags. Be very careful if you're copying me, because I'm going to connect this up to the mains and see if it works out of the machine, which could be dangerous. You've got to be very careful with mains electricity that you don't touch it, obviously. And also, another thing to remember is don't think you can just connect it up and switch it on, because what will happen is if you do that, the inertia of the motor will make it spin and it will fly off the bench at an enormous rate of knots, and you will regret it, I can tell you. So make sure you hold it firmly or put it in a vise or something. In this case, I'm going to put it in the vise because it's much easier to show you. So I'm going to pop this in my vise here. So we've got the motor in the vise, we've got it connected to the block. All that's got to be done now is for me to shut that block down, and hopefully the motor will run. And this is the moment of truth, folks, isn't it? Because either it will run and I should be jubilant, or it won't run and I should look a right prat. So here we go. I'm just going to turn it on now. Wait for it. Wait for it. Perfect. Nothing wrong with that, folks. Nothing wrong with that at all. That was a throwaway thing, you see, and now by doing that I've spent a bit of time. I mean, it's taken me longer because I've had to show you as well. I've filmed it, which takes a lot longer. Make sure when you're doing this, don't forget you've still got it plugged in. Make sure you disconnect it. It's all too easy to accidentally put that down and touch a live wire, and then you'll get a bit of a shock. As I mentioned earlier, I've got to do something about these wires in here because they're all twisted up and shorted, look almost shorted out. So we'll take them out from the top. There we go. Now look at that. See where it's all twisted up and there's bare wires on here. So it's incredible that it hasn't shorted, because both the wires have got the insulation. That yellow wire's ripped completely, the insulation's gone completely, look, and it's wrapped itself around the red wire. It seems to me as though the motor's been spinning round inside the casing, so I shall replace all of that. Look at this, they just brought the wires out and clamped them together with these, not detachable. But in the old days, they wouldn't have left something like that. They would have made it so you could take it apart and put screws in it and everything, done the proper job. That's a complete bodge, but sadly that's how things are today. It's throwaway society, and I don't like it. I think it's awful. It's a terrible waste. There's so much stuff thrown away that could be repaired, really, and this is a good example. Now, rather than using the push-on tags, which do sometimes come off, especially if there's movement in there, I'm going to solder the wires directly on there, because if it goes wrong again, it'll probably get thrown away anyway. You'll get a better joint if you just dip the end of the wire in a bit of soldering flux, if you've got any, that is. It's not essential, you don't have to do it. Get your solder handy, get the solder on, just tin the end of the wire. Pop a bit of flux on there, just to be on the safe side. Just put a dab of solder on there, as you can see. And now it's just simply a matter of putting the wire on there and holding it for a few seconds while the solder melts. There we are, I think that'll be fine. So what I've done, I've soldered both the wires on so that they're much more secure than those tags, which I have known those tags just pull off. So that's that. So we've got the two wires connected now, and it's just a matter of putting it back in the case. Well, I've got the motor back in now. One thing to remember is when you're putting the motor back in, make sure you connect the two wires up to the automatic cord winder, because it's easy to forget that, and if you do, you won't get any power in at all, obviously. As you can see in here, what I've done, I thought the best way of doing that was I brought my wires up and I've used these little 5 amp screwed terminal connectors to replace them. I think they're better than these cramped on ones. I have got some of these, but I prefer these because you can take them apart again. So that's all fairly neat in there. So I'll just plug it in and make sure it works okay before I put the top back on. Well, we've got it back together. The proof of the pudding is in the eating, as they say. So all I've got to do now is plug it in and see if it works. The moment of truth, folks. You never know. I'm confident. I am confident. Plug it in, switch it on. On our switch. This is it, folks. Hey, look at that. Beautiful. wrong with that? Now go on, tell me that wasn't worth doing. I spent an afternoon doing it. It's cost nothing except my time. And when I say an afternoon, if I'd have been just doing it, I would have done it 2 hours ago. But it's taken me longer because I've been filming it to show you people how to do it. Not that I think there's going to be many people who are going to want to mend a Panasonic. Which model is it? MCE 735. But anyway, if you come across one and the bearing's gone, it is possible to replace the bearing even though you're not supposed to. So there you are, one Panasonic duly mended. Let's hope my daughter's happy. She ought to bring me some cakes now, hasn't she? Bye for now, folks. And Sarah, if you're watching, your vacuum cleaner is now ready to collect. Bye.